Between gorgeous cinematics, flashy gameplay, and an interesting story and world, Overwatch has no shortage of ways to attract people to join their player base. But I don't think anything is as eye-catching and draws you more to the game than Overwatch's characters. Their style, their feel, their vibe, they set a standard for other games and media to hit, and they are unparalleled in this genre. Overwatch's character designs stand head and shoulders above their competition. But why? And how? I like to point to just one thing and say, this. But that's just not possible. There's too much that goes into these designs for any one point to be the explanation for their flair. And while I don't love every design to bits, I can't, in all honesty, say I think any of them are truly bad. So let's look at why Overwatch's characters look the way they do. Overwatch has used color, silhouette, and shapes to tell you what a character is about just by looking at them. Let's look at one hero from each role: tank, damage, and support. Knowing these three categories, it's easy to tell which character falls into which role. Reinhardt is big, bulky, and heavy. His massive plate armor tells you he is durable and tough. Genji is lean and nimble. His sharp edges make him look dangerous, and his streetwear clothes and shoes make him look like he moves quickly. Mercy's angelic aesthetic gives off immediate healer energy, and her white and yellow color palette make her look approachable and kind. Since Overwatch is such a fast-paced game that focuses a lot around mobility, these characters also need to look good moving, and their designs need to play a role in their movement too. Reinhardt's broad back has an engine on it that propels him forward like a rocket. The cloth that hangs on the back of Genji's head flows in the wind behind him as he dashes. And Mercy's wings expand and glow as she flies around to give her a more noticeable profile. Even the world building of Overwatch's mechanics plays a part in their character design. In this universe, yellow signifies healing, so you'll often see support characters with lots of yellow in their design. Supports that are predominantly not yellow often change their design when they heal to include yellow. Purple means poison, so characters that have poison-like abilities have mostly violet color palettes. Even characters that don't use poison, but instead are poisoned, are purple tinted or use purple in their abilities. See what I mean? Stuff that you wouldn't even normally think about plays a major part in character design and recognizability. In a game like Overwatch, where almost every player will have an alternative outfit equipped for a character at all times, characters need to be posed and animated in a unique way for their silhouette to still be unmistakable, even when their hair and clothes are different. But while Overwatch does all of this very well, these are all things that every game or piece of media needs to consider when designing their characters. What makes Overwatch really unique is that all of the characters from Overwatch 1 went through a design change and got a whole new look for Overwatch 2. And while something like that can muddle with recognizability and iconicness, it also allows designs to communicate storytelling and growth. If you watch my video on FNAF's character designs, you know I adore that kind of thing. So enough talking about Overwatch's general character design philosophy, let's look at each character specifically and judge them, starting with the newest hero, Venture. Venture is something. There's a lot going on. I read somewhere that the Overwatch team took advice from an LGBTQ+ fashion company when designing Venture, and I think that's most apparent when looking at their coat. It's very asymmetrical with a lot of overlapping flaps. In my opinion, the imbalance isn't all that pleasant to look at, especially when looking at it from the back. And it's a little weird how Venture's faction's logo is only half visible. But it's not all bad. I like these chunky boots, and the little jets on the back make a funny face. Venture's goggles are pretty cool, I wish they were always wearing them. And this fire tattoo is unique, but it's unfortunately covered up by Venture's collar. Venture actually has decently consistent flame imagery with their tattoo, weapon pattern, and even their hair to an extent. I like consistent theming and character design like that. Venture really looks like someone who likes to get their hands dirty, so the designers definitely succeeded on that account. Their big backpack also leads to quite a unique silhouette. The thing I'm going to complain about the most when it comes to Overwatch 2's designs are their colors. When compared to its predecessor, Overwatch 2's characters tend to play it pretty safe color-wise. Venture actually could have benefited from this philosophy, being a character who would make use of neutral browns and earth tones, but they decided to outfit them in a bland tan, yellow, and teal. I would have really liked to see Venture with a more amber-based color palette, reminiscent of Orange Canyons. Ana. For all the characters present in Overwatch 1, we'll be looking at their original design first, then their Overwatch 2 design, and then comparing the two. Ana's OG design is great. Good color theory has resulted in Ana clearly being a blue character, despite the large amounts of sandy browns. Ana looks like a sniper even without her rifle in hand. She looks like she would camouflage easily in the desert that she resides in, and I love how they have Ana's equipment from her abilities stored on her design, with her grenade strapped to a belt and her nano boost attached to her forearm. Her run-down holy coat makes her look like the vigilante she is, as though she doesn't have access to the top-of-line equipment anymore and needs to make do with her old jacket. Her eye patch and tattoo make her look immediately iconic and memorable, and the bits of yellow along the medical cross symbol on her pouch make sure you don't get confused about her role. One of the strengths of Overwatch 2's redesigns is that they look really sleek and modern. The style is usually pretty spot on. This is pretty clear with Ana's redesign. By switching the color placement on Ana's design, she now has a blue jacket with a brown suit instead of the other way around. They maintain her good color palette without being stagnant. I love her white camo scarf. AO2 designs also like to make use of patterns and textures like this. The extra blue line on the top of her hood is a nice little touch. My favorite part of the design is the gold bird symbol on the back, it looks really sick. But where this design stumbles is in storytelling. Ana's original design made her look like an old, retired soldier who took up arms once again. This design does away with that. She looks streamlined. Too streamlined. Ana's specific asymmetry made it look like there was a purpose for everything she was wearing. It's not as busy as the Overwatch 1 design, which is usually a good thing, but the original design wasn't busy just for busy's sake. Every detail had a reason to be there. Getting rid of those details makes it feel like it's sort of been watered down. The new design looks like it was made with fashion over function in mind. She no longer looks like an outlaw, a thief, or vigilante, and I think that's kind of a bummer. There's a lot to like about this design, but I don't know if I could confidently call it an upgrade. Ashe. I love how she looks like a mix of rich businesswoman and cowgirl outlaw. She has this consistent three-pronged star imagery all over. The browns lean into the country girl idea, but the reds and whites makes her look like a villain, especially to people who know about Overwatch's lore. While Ashe isn't actually a part of the criminal organization Talon, the fact that they share a color scheme makes her look evil at a glance. It's really impressive to me that the Overwatch team designed two characters with big cowboy hats and managed to make their silhouettes not even a tiny bit mistakable. What I don't like about the design is the wasted space. Ashe has a lot of belts that don't do anything, which is a character design pet peeve of mine. I prefer for designs to have a reason for existing more than just, this part doesn't have anything going on, let's add a belt. Ashe is unique though, because all of the equipment she should be carrying for her abilities would have actually given a purpose to those belts. She could be carrying her coach gun on her side. What are these little canisters? Why put those there instead of her dynamite? All in all, it's a good design, but not as good as it could have been. Ashe's AO2 design is something I have really mixed opinions about. She's a lot more stylish now, I think. This chain is cool, and I like the more confident reds in her design. This puffy texture on the inside of her jacket definitely makes her look more luxurious, and I like her haircut. But they did away with all the white in her design except for her hair, which was a shame since it had been a real nice contrast with the red. Replacing almost all the brown in her design in exchange for black gets rid of the country aesthetic and makes her look a lot less like a cowgirl, along with the loss of her suit-like elements. It almost makes her hat look like an add-on rather than a core part of her design. They also deleted the three-pointed star-shaped language in her design for some reason. And while they've gotten rid of most of her needless belts, they only replaced them with needless zippers, so it's not like much has changed. And this may be a nitpick, but these random light gray parts of her pants really clash with the rest of her outfit. Again, arguably an upgrade when it comes to style, but not an upgrade on the whole. Baptiste. A cool bit of trivia about this design is that it's actually based on recycled concept art from Mercy. Bap has a pretty sweet look. I like his steel elements and love how his backpack stores his abilities like his amplification matrix and regen burst. His design is a little confusing when it comes to color placement though. While the teal on his chest serves to balance the orange on his neck, the teal on his thighs is just a bit weird. It leaves the rest of his legs feeling off balance since they have no teal or orange on them whatsoever. And while I don't love this clementine hue, having more of it on his bottom half would have been useful. Baptiste's AO2 design is something I didn't love at first glance, but I've actually really warmed up to it. They swapped out most of the orange for white, and it really works. He looks a lot more confidently like a support, and it's tough to miss the red cross patch on his chest. In this design, the teal color is used smartly. Here they place it on his exo boots, drawing your eyes to one of his core abilities. Speaking of his boots, they're a lot cooler now, looking bulkier and bouncier. And while I sort of prefer his old hair, this is overall an upgrade in my opinion. The best part is how the tangerine orange has been reduced to a pleasant accent color. Bastion. I'm personally very fond of the old technology overcome by nature aesthetic, so I really like Bastion. He looks battered and worn down, and the forest greens and copper oranges work amazing together. I won't be mentioning animation that much in this video, but the fact that Bastion is always jiggling really sells the idea that he's barely held together. I don't have a lot to say about it, but I do like this design. It's not all that stimulating, but there's no denying that it's simply effective. Bastion's redesign actually benefits from the smoothing out of Overwatch 1 designs. In between games, he was adopted by the engineer Torbjorn, so Bastion looking more modern and sleek really works. I love that he's wearing Torb's old hat. I do miss the more predominant copper color from his old design though. It had a beautiful contrast with the green. What might be the best storytelling in this design is the decal Torbjorn painted on Bastion's shoulder to match the wing of his pet bird, Ganymede. An honestly great design despite its simplicity. Brigitte. She's not bad. She definitely looks like an apprentice to or new generation version of Reinhardt, like the Robin to his Batman. Her gear imagery is cool storytelling since it represents both her faction and her father, as do the streams of what is seemingly molten magma. She really looks like she designed and forged her own armor, and the attached rib clots make her look like she has been traveling around the country being a hero. Onto the Autu design. I don't like it. But before I get to that, let me mention the parts I do like. The addition of lion-themed elements on her shoulder, and especially the paws on her back, are a really cool way to lean further into the idea that she's Reinhardt's squire. Okay, onto the negatives. Her yellow jacket thing is really weird. Why is it attached at the sides? Why are there pieces of belts coming out of it? Is it a sweatshirt, a coat, or a dress? What is this 08 on her armor? Is this supposed to be her 8th version of her armor? Then why isn't her original armor marked with a number? And why is this armor so much smoother and manufactured looking if it's still something she forged herself? Why did you take off her hairpieces? The metal bits match Reinhardt's helmet really well, and if you're leaning into more Reinhardt references with the lion symbolism, why take other Reinhardt-influenced imagery away? We can actually see that Brigitte had a headpiece that looked even more like Reinhardt's helmet originally, but they decided to remove it soon before release. It is a little bulky looking, but then why not just let her keep a form of her original headpiece then? Overwatch 2's redesign seems to run into a consistent issue where things are removed just to change something from the original design, even if the design looked better if it wasn't changed. Anyway, this design is bad. The original was pretty good, not anything I adored, but still well made. This is just a straight downgrade. Cassidy. It's sort of a basic design that doesn't try anything all that intriguing, but it definitely works for what it's going for. The Banff belt buckle and bullets on the cowboy hat are my favorite details by far, and it's cool how he stores his magnetic grenades on his hip. His serape provides a distinct silhouette, and this orange-red color pairs well with the rest of the earth tones on his design. But what I don't love are the random elements. This techno chest piece clashes hard with the banded cowboy vibe of the rest of the design, and this one knee buckle thing feels pointless. I think his prosthetic arm was meant to be cool and unique, but that's before Overwatch's world decided that cybernetic implants and bionic limbs are a very common thing. So before all that, his arm was a unique element of his design. Now it's not anything anyone who's familiar with Overwatch would care about. It's the kind of design where, if you glance at it, it looks fine, but looking too close at it will show you the small flaws. For the most part, it's good though. Cassidy's Overwatch 2 look is one of the only ones we got to see concept art for. The look they landed on is pretty slick, I must admit. While the dash pattern on his serape feels tacked on, and while I don't like how his thigh armor plates have seemingly been stapled onto his legs rather than strapped onto them, I honestly really prefer this design to his old one. Unlike Ash, they kept his mostly brown coloring, allowing him to maintain a cowboy's color scheme. This brighter red is eye-catching, but it doesn't steal focus since the red has been spread to the rest of his look to even things out. It also pairs supremely with his newly painted robot arm. And while this chest piece is even more cyberpunk than the last one, it no longer clashes with the aesthetic since the technological elements have been placed all around his character design this time around. I kind of miss his bootcut pants, but I'm so glad they decided to not axe the parts of Cassidy's design that I really liked, like his hat bullets and belt buckle. Not everything needs to be changed. My final nitpick is this black textured line with a zipper. I don't know what this is. Why is it there? Diva. Diva technically has 4 designs with a unique suit and mecha per game. Let's go with the mecha first. Toki, which is the mech's name, is supposed to look like a bunny. It doesn't. Not to me, at least. The ears on top never look like they belong to a rabbit, in my opinion. Maybe because the mech is almost entirely bubblegum pink. I do like the teal elements, and the company logos all over it really do give off the vibe of a professional racer or esports streamer. But I do wonder why the mech is so dirty and stained. Diva's a mechanic, and she cares enough about her mech to give it a name and refer to it as a person, so you'd wonder why it's so unclean. The worst part of Toki's design are the brown patch-looking things on its legs. Diva herself isn't anything too special. Her headphones definitely look more like bunny ears than her mech, but I question why her suit doesn't have the same shade of blue as her mech. It is at least a pleasing color scheme. Diva's Overwatch 2 design fixes a lot of my complaints from her original design, surprisingly. The added white elements really work well with the pinks and blues of the rest of her look, and her mech having white in it along with its antenna now being curved certainly gives off more bunny wrapper energy than before. The brown pouches are also gone, and now Toki has more indigo blue elements to match Diva's suit. Speaking of Diva's suit, I love the teal elements that have now been added to it, directly matching her mech's windshield. Her ponytail and armored bits also make her look much more like a military pilot than her last suit, without taking away the gamer vibe at all. My only two nitpicks, and these are two very small and petty ones, are the lime green parts on the back of Toki and the weirdly shaped plates on the back of Diva's legs. Definitely an improvement over the last design though. Doomfist. He definitely looks cool, but he doesn't look like the heir to a very successful business or a plotting visionary that wants to bring about the end of the world. He sort of just looks like a bad guy. This pattern fanny pack is strange looking, and the red cloths feel tacked on, especially the armband one. Menacing, but sort of uninteresting. Though the Giga Cyber Arm is definitely one of a kind silhouette among the rest of the roster. I like it. His Overwatch shoe design is much better. He looks so much more regal and kingly. He genuinely looks like a wealthy evil warlord, which is what Doomfist is. The golden elements and patterns give him an air of importance, and the color scheme of red, white, black, and gold is perfect. This fur collar, amazing. These tassels, a much better way to incorporate Scarlet into his look than just tying a rag on him. Even his giant arm looks cooler. He looks awesome. I just don't like his cybernetic slip-on shoes. I kinda prefer his old footwear, or lack thereof. Echo. The only character released in Overwatch 1 that didn't get a redesign, because she was originally planned to be held until Overwatch 2 released. She did get a slight altering from her debut in Ash's cinematic though. His look is pretty dope. The spiky legs and cone-shaped head keep her looking distinct, and I love how her limbs are detached from her torso. It really aids in making her look weightless. Echo's curved shape language and white coloring do make her look more like a support than a damage hero, and that's because she was actually going to be a support. It's just that the devs decided her ultimate didn't fit a support hero, so they reworked her role around that. She has arguably the most different side profile of all the roster, so it's a pretty neat design in my book. Genji. Cyborg Ninja is a pretty striking concept and it's executed very well here. The brown, green, and grays are super cohesive. His pointy shapes communicate his role well, and I love how his headcloth thing serves a purpose in giving his movements some flair. It's just a great design. His Overwatch 2 look takes a great design and makes it even better. Not only does his new look simply look cool, it even serves a storybuilding purpose. In the time since Overwatch fell, it's not like Genji can just walk around in a cyborg suit, so what does he do? He buys clothes! It's so simple and stupid, but I love it. They kept his iconic color palette, and the cyberpunk streetwear aesthetic is shockingly good. I especially love how his weapons are now being stored in inconspicuous zipper bag sheaths. I adore how he just rolled up his sleeves to allow him to use his shurikens. His hood is also awesome, it's such a bummer he's not wearing it. I assume they decided they didn't want to mess with his silhouette, since his horns and headcloth are very recognizable, but his street render skin makes it work just fine. I actually drew a mock-up of Genji's look with his hood on but his horns and headcloth poking out, and I think it turned out pretty great, but I'm going to save that in case I do a series on redesigning Overwatch characters. If you would be interested in seeing that, let me know in the comments. Back to Genji though, this design is incredible. The only nitpick I have is this belt strap picking out of his back pocket for some reason, but that's the tiniest little thing in the world, so I will not hold it against Genji's Auto look. In truth, it might be my favorite redesign of them all. Hanzo. Between his arm tattoo, his lightning and cloud motif on his top, the scale pattern on his bottoms, and the weird patchwork armor on his boots, his original look might be the most patterned design in Overwatch 1. What's really neat is how he has two cloths hanging from his head as opposed to Genji's singular head cloth, referencing how his brother has access to only one Shimada dragon for his ultimate, but Hanzo uses two. It's probably my favorite part of his design, but I also really like his little gourd. But overall, this design is not stimulating to look at, because it is almost all a flat gray. I understand Hanzo doesn't have a very brightly colored personality, and that all the excessive patterning was supposed to make up for the lack of color, but I really felt like there could have been a better way to do it. Hanzo's boots are probably my least favorite part of his design though. They look like cloven hooves and look totally disconnected from the rest of his design. His redesign is better, but it's also sort of a missed opportunity. This time the design has blended technology and traditional clothing in a more cohesive way, and while it's still very boring when it comes to color usage, the patterning work is certainly an improvement. It doesn't feel random anymore, it feels smartly placed behind overlapping clothing articles. It doesn't steal focus, it just looks neat. His boots are also a lot less ugly. I like his archery glove a lot, but this design could have really benefited from some color. I think Hanzo's casual skin should have served as inspiration for his redesign, and taking a page out of his Festival Skins book by coloring in his tattoo and adding some white to the look would have done wonders. It's good, but it could be a lot better. Iliari. I want to love Iliari. There are parts of her design I really like her hair fringe looking reminiscent of the sun's rays, and her cool earrings and braids. And have you seen her weapon? It's a laser gun sword. That's sick. But I have issues when it comes to Iliari's colors. She has red, blue, white, yellow, black, and brown fighting for attention on her. She would look much better with a more focused color palette, something warm and bright like the sun, containing lots of oranges and yellows. I do like her cloak, and I really like the triangular shape language all over her design, again meant to look like sunbeams. If her colors were just better, she'd be a much higher tier design. Junker Queen. She looks metal. Get it? Her mohawk gives her a distinct silhouette, and they really nailed the scrapyard post-apocalypse vibe. By far the coolest part of her design is that she wears the limbs and skulls of the Omnic warlords she killed. The reds and blackish browns work pretty well, and I especially like the markings around her eyes, super menacing. She looks blocky enough to be a tank, but all the spiky parts make her look quite dangerous and plays into her bleed effect in gameplay as well. I can't really find anything concrete to complain about. Junkrat. There's a lot to like. His Junkrat prosthetics imply he blew them off in one of his explosions and made his own replacement limbs, and the sparks on the tips of his hair are a neat touch. He really looks like a mad scientist, and his hair looking like fire is pretty cool. Characters from this part of the world in Overwatch's universe, Australia, tend to sport a lot of asymmetry, and Junkrat does this very well. Even outside of his silhouette, his tattoo and hands-on patches make his design look intentionally all over the place. Where his design doesn't succeed, however, is color-wise, again. Maybe I'm just too opinionated when it comes to color usage, but these hues are kind of bland. The dusty tans definitely match the locale, but all the colors are fighting for my eye's attention. The light greens and bright oranges are conflicting hard. But his rip tire on his back provides a very memorable profile. His Overwatch 2 redesign is, all in all, sublime. These goggles are neat and make him look more like a demolition expert or tinkerer. Changing his color scheme from greens and grays to a more striking orange and red was a very smart decision. Changing his leg wear from simple shorts to half pants with one side ripped to fit his peg leg is a nice touch. At first, I thought his prosthetics looked a little too clean, but upon closer inspection, I think it works. There are nails and screws sticking out and scars all over it. And this spring coil is cool without looking like super futuristic technology that shouldn't have been there. I'm glad they kept his hands-on patches, but there is a very fascinating design change that I want to bring attention to. They actually resized his arm tattoo so you can see it better. On one hand, I'm like, that makes no sense canonically. But on the other hand, it looks way better like this, so I'm okay with it. One change I mixed on is Junk's hair. I think it's a neat idea that after his hair got blown off, it regrew during the timeskip between Overwatch 1 and 2, and I kind of missed the more unhinged hairstyle of the first design. Still, the redesign is certainly an improvement in my opinion. Kiriko, Overwatch 2's moneymaker. We got to see a lot of different concepts for Kiriko, and usually when we get to see a concept art of a character beforehand, you can tell that the final product took the best ideas from different sketches and put them together in a spectacular way. Kiriko is not such a character. Almost all of these concepts look significantly better than what we got, this one especially. Kiriko is one of the best examples of silhouette imposter syndrome of the cast, and giving her a gigantic shuriken weapon like this would have eradicated that issue. She looks so boring compared to this concept art, my gosh, and this color palette is lame. A Ninja Foxtrot yokai-inspired crime-fighting youth trying to save her city could have yielded a truly spectacular design, but that's not what they went with. She looks like a wannabe weeb. These shoes are ugly, her skin-tight techno armor tights make little sense, and while I don't think the Shrine-Bane aesthetic was the right way to go for this character, if you were going to go that way, you could have executed it way better. If there's any one character I would want to redesign, it's Kiriko. I'm not a professional character designer by any means, but I genuinely believe I could do much better than this. And I admit, while I've done my best to try to be impartial during this whole video, I might be a little biased against this character, but I truly do not like this design. Lifeweaver. I'm actually shockingly fond of this design. I don't love the overuse of cybernetic implants in new Overwatch designs, but it works for this character pretty well, considering his build-their gameplay and lore as a hard-light architect. But onto more concrete stuff. Lifeweaver is a rare occurrence of bold and bright color usage in Overwatch 2 designs, using pastel pinks and teals along with more stark golds and dark blues. His color scheme is reminiscent of Spring and succeeds in making him look like a healer. Multiple patterns on his designs aren't too much and don't fight for attention. The best part of his design is his silhouette. These floating petals are such an unprecedented design element, and I really like them. This movement study done by Daryl Tan shows how well Lifeweaver's unique shapes work in motion. Really good stuff. Definitely one of the better designs of the Overwatch 2 exclusive characters. Lucio. This DJ's original look has the idea of a good character design, but I think the execution of it leaves a bit to be desired. The heavy look of his skates puts focus on the profile of his legs, which is good because Lucio's whole shtick is speed. And I like how the fingertips of his left arm look like they're made for spinning records. The colors are okay, I guess. The frog imagery is cool and all, but I'm looking at this design and I'm just thinking there's a lot going on for not a lot of reason. There are a lot of tubes and wires in this design and I don't really know why that is. This armband looks like it's meant to check Lucio's blood pressure. And I think this earpiece is supposed to look like a headphone, but it really doesn't. I do like the consistent speaker slash subwoofer looking stuff all over his design, and how his belt buckle looks like an audio symbol. It's a fine design, it works, but it could be significantly better by just streamlining it. And what do you know? Streamlining is exactly what Overwatch 2 redesigns are good at. Getting rid of all the yellow in Lucio's design was a smart choice. It makes his colors look way more cohesive, as does moving the blue from just his skates to his whole body. Lucio's hair looks way better like this too. These tubes are kind of weird, but they look cool. His earpieces actually become proper headphones and it looks much better. His silhouette isn't as bottom heavy as before, and despite being something I praised about the original design, personally I don't think the new design loses anything from that change. I love the change to Lucio's backpack too. While the old one also looked like a frog, this one looks a lot more like Lucio's specific frog logo. Lucio no longer wearing a tank top does hide his frog tattoo, but I'm okay with that. We're not even halfway done with the roster yet, and this is at least the third shoulder tattoo we've seen so far. And when everyone has a shoulder tattoo, no one does. So I don't mind that we can't see it anymore, since it's not a particularly uncommon design trait in Overwatch. Anyway, this is a good design, a definitive upgrade for sure. Mauga. This guy is funny because instead of patterning his clothes, the designers decided to pattern his body. These tattoos are a lot to look at, but surprisingly don't steal focus. Mauga also has a great silhouette with his massive guns and his massive machine guns. A neat little detail is that Mauga named his weapons, and Gunny has a G engraved on it and Cha-Cha has a C. Mauga's silhouette is also made recognizable with his big hair. You're not going to be mistaking who this guy is, even from a long distance. Another really cool detail in Mauga's design is that his solar plexus has what looks like a stylized depiction of the Talon logo, which is the fraction Mauga is a part of. In terms of color, Mauga plays it pretty safe with just orange, brown, and black, but I like it. It reminds me of a volcano, which works for him, I think. Mei. I like Mei a lot. Between her snowflake hairpin, her pet robot on her back, and her oversized gloves and boots, she has a very recognizable silhouette. It also helps that she has a body type that's not common in Overwatch's roster. Mei also has a cool outfit with Chinese-inspired fashion and big chunky snow boots. All the fur elements along with her white and blue hues make it very obvious that ice is Mei's thing. Mei's Overwatch 2 design is one that I liked when I first saw it, but started to dislike the more I looked at it. This new hairstyle isn't working for me. I think the bun was way cuter, and replacing her pretty snowflake hairpin with this metal tube thing was a terrible design choice. It's so much more boring, has way less personality, and takes away an iconic part of her profile. While I like this faint snowflake pattern on her top, the loss of Chinese fashion elements is a major pity. Her big gloves have shrunk into metal armor pieces, and her boots, while still large, no longer look like snow boots. Overall, she's lost most of her fur parts, which makes her look a lot less icy. It's not all bad though. The new design is a lot less busy, and I like the 2 on her chest, as though this is the second version of her outfit, probably made by Winston. Still a downgrade though. Mercy. She might be Overwatch's most iconic character design, honestly. The Cyber Angel Doctor concept is very well executed with these wings and halo. The color placement is superb, with the white at the forefront and the yellows and oranges acting as a great accent. As the game's stable healer, using this color palette was a smart choice. What's really cool is that on Mercy's back you can find a stylized version of the Caduceus staff, a famous symbol of healing, which is also what Mercy's weapon is called. The only thing I don't like is the amount of random holes on her. Maybe it's like a moth joke? Still, Mercy is a simply excellent design, and her silhouette is unmistakable. Her redesign is a mixed bag. We've done away with the random holes, and I'm fond of the decision to switch the color to be more yellow and gold than orange. The brown elements work well, and the gold lighting throughout provides really nice detail without crowding the look. They did unfortunately get rid of the Caduceus staff symbol on her back, despite keeping the twinning sake imagery. Her halo also looks a lot better as a pastel gold visor than a solid gold hoop around her head. But now, we need to talk about the most important and most divisive change in Mercy's Overwatch 2 redesign. Her hair. When it was first revealed, people said it looked like a Karen cut, and while I do see the resemblance, I always thought it was a cute look for her. My issue though is that her ponytail was an extremely iconic part of her design. Getting rid of it ruins her silhouette, but it does accomplish a unique character writing point. One of my favorite things to say about this subject is that good design can convey story and character without words, and I mentioned earlier that a benefit of redesigns is they can denote growth, and this design actually does that. See, Mercy used to have a similar bob cut as his look back when she actively used to fight as a combat medic, but she later changed it to a ponytail when she stopped. So it's interesting that she'd wear her hair like this again, now that she's returned to active duty in Overwatch, once again in a war against Null Sector like the last time she had this hairstyle. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Either way, I wonder if the design would have been better if they managed to give her both a bob cut and kept her old ponytail somehow. Moira. Did you know she's canonically 6.5 feet tall? I think it's to play into her imposing nature, which is good. Moira is covered in mostly black, but purple manages to stand out as her primary color, balanced well by her bright orange hair. I love the running tubes throughout her design, it really makes her look like a menacing mad scientist. The spikes all over her are evocative of metal syringes, or the poisonous spikes of a sea urchin. Her half mask is meant to be a not so subtle nod to the fact that she's evil despite being a former member of Overwatch, like she's two-faced. Her heterochromia also plays into this, having one red eye, the color of Talon, and one blue eye, the color of Overwatch. Interestingly, it's her blue eye that's hidden by her mask. To me, it implies that Moira doesn't really care what side she's on, she just wants to further her own goals. It's a cool design trait. And I like the asymmetry in Moira's hands, with her healing hand looking totally normal but her damaging hand having sharper, longer nails and a purple discoloration, like she's ill from experimenting on herself. Moira shares Mercy's original problem of having a bunch of little holes in her clothes though. Despite that, Moira has a solid design with decent storytelling. Her redesign, however, has even more storytelling. Moira's damaged hand has become more violent and sickly, and she's even started wearing different clothes to compensate, as if the flesh has become more sensitive and like it's less painful to not have any clothing touching it. Moira's color scheme is also different, replacing most of her black with tan. Surprisingly, it doesn't clash with the purple, and while she still has holes in her design, making them look more like buttons than just random circles alleviates the problem somewhat. I don't know how I feel about her new mask though. It technically accomplishes the same thing as her last mask, but it also has random holes on it now. Honestly, it reminds me of Jason Voorhees' mask. Moira is also a lot less pale than she was before, which I don't like, since it made her look more sickly and sinister. This more peachy coloration makes her look less evil. Her ginger hair has also been desaturated, which I'm not a fan of, and I sort of find myself missing her little spikes. I still think Moira's redesign is a good one though, despite all the holes. Orisa. I'm noticing a lot of tan being used in Overwatch 1's designs, but Orisa uses it well. Green, yellow, tan. It works. Orisa's biggest strength, though, is her unique silhouette. Big horns, horse body, gun arm, and giant bongo on the back, it's pretty inspired, honestly. Ana characters get to play around a lot with unique bodies, which is always fun. I don't have a ton else to say about Orisa, though. Being a horse is most of what she is. While her redesign is also a horse, it has more going on. While I think Orisa's horns shrinking is a downgrade, practically everything else about this design is an improvement in my eyes. I absolutely adore her new wire cable hair meant to look like dreads, and all the colors are being used a lot more interestingly. Mixing darker browns and blacks into her body brings an awesome contrast with the bright greens and yellows. Her body is also more detailed with patterns and shapes, which still avoids the issue of looking too crowded. Overall, a major upgrade. Thumbs up. Pharah. The Egyptian influence in her armor is very noticeable and very cool. What I never noticed about it is how it fades from a bright sky blue to a dull shade of indigo. I think the design team would do well to use more gradients like this over excessive patterning. Her silhouette is also quite memorable with her giant jetpack, shoulder pads, and helmet. I don't think there's anything about this design that I'd really dislike. I can't really say the same thing for her Out 2 design though. We faced the return of random holes, but more importantly, I'm not a huge fan of this white. Looking at her concept art, I think the design would have been better if they swapped out the white for more gold or black. I do like her slightly altered armor design though, and her helmet's visor not being transparent is a nice touch. But I miss her little braids a lot. Ramatra. I love this design. The skeletal-like ribcage around him makes him look threatening, his wire hair is dope, his scarf makes him look like a leader, and the iconic browns and purples of Null Sector are very pleasant to look at. I love how Ramatra's design totally shifts in silhouette for his nemesis form, showing a shift between his tactical precision as a strategist and his ruthless strength as a fighter. His pose while transformed is also reminiscent of Zenyatta's default stance, which is so clever. This is a delightful character design, 10 out of 10. Reaper, another candidate for Overwatch's most iconic design. The bone-colored mask really sells the undead vibe, and the hints of red over mostly black design are effortlessly cool. His silhouette with his broad shoulders and long cloak is an instant classic. Using his shotgun shells as pretty much his only pops of color weirdly sells him as a killer. I like his little metal insignia hanging from his belt, that's cute. Maybe the only things I don't like are the tan sleeve puffs around his biceps, that's not his skin, and the asymmetrical spikes on his forearms. Like, why is this one just sticking out of his hand? Just make it match the other arm. Otherwise, it's great. Reaper's redesign is cool, but not as cool as before. His hood and cloak could look tighter and more restrictive. If they were going to change the size of his hood, which I don't think they needed to, they should have made it bigger, not smaller. And changing his cloak to be sleeveless makes his body look shrimpier. And while I think the bionic look for his forearms could work, I really wish his shoulders maintained the same profile with his cloak. These shoulder pads are not nearly as cool. The silver mask is neat, I guess, but this design puts too much stock in futuristic elements in my opinion. Shrinking his shotgun shells and getting rid of most of them was also a downgrade, and his boots look worse. And I wish they kept his little hanging symbol. They didn't even replace it with anything. At least they removed the uneven spiky things. They swapped them out for these serrated arm blades, which look more inconvenient than menacing, but I still prefer them over what we had before. Reinhardt. There's much to be appreciated here. This profile is unmistakable, the helmet and gargantuan shoulder pads being key reasons for this. It's not too stimulating color-wise, being almost all gray, but it's satisfactory I think, since he's meant to just look like a knight, and knights are usually gray. The lion shield is cool though, as is the very large rocket booster engine on his back. Reinhardt's new design is fun. I say new, but we knew about it for years before AO2 came out. In any case, using multiple different shades of gray makes Reinhardt automatically more interesting to look at than before. I like the idea of adding more pops of color, but I would have liked orange more than yellow. I like the added line imagery, and overall his armor looks cooler. And I love how I see this is Reinhardt's 9th armor set, with this one having 09 on it and the last one having 08. I don't like his beard and hair though. His helmet provided a much more iconic and cool profile than the man bun, and honestly, his beard is just modeled ugly. I think there are more pros than cons though. Roadhog. Hog is a weird one. The pig snout and giant hook are very memorable. I like his skull knee pad, his tattoo is cool, using a license plate as a belt buckle is such a unique design trait. His stitch-up gas mask makes him very frightening, and there's no questioning what role he is when you look at him. I love how he has rings on one of his hands saying left, so he can remember which direction is which. Very funny. His redesign does a lot of good for Hog, but also takes a lot of his personality out. Let's discuss the good first. I like how his pants are just straight denim now. His old camo was a strange look. I like how one of the things he has pinned to his vest is one of the patches that used to be on Junkrat's shorts. I like the new spikes on his mask, along with the nose ring, and I think I prefer the mohawk to the ponytail. The patch Mari pin on his belt is also a nice little aspect to Hog's character design. But I miss his skull knee pad, and the rib tire on his shoulder, and the spikes on his knuckles, and his old bracer. I miss a lot of things. But I do like him wearing a jacket now over having his vest just on his skin. Can't really tell if it's an upgrade or not. Sigma. He's cool, if a little confused. This teal is very saturated, and I don't think it flows super well with the rest of the design. There are a lot of pieces and bits and bobs in his design, but not a lot of focus. I like how he holds his shield generator on his forearm like a bracer, and the shackles on his ankles look like they're meant to keep him imprisoned, which goes along with his lore. The most fascinating aspect of his design is his lack of shoes, as mental asylum patients used to not be allowed to wear shoes so they couldn't choke other patients with the laces. Sigma's redesign, however, is exceptional. The bright teal has been reduced to an accent color, with his blue eye taking the spotlight now. I really like this color change, as it makes him look more like a scientist. The floating headwear is also more noticeable now than it was in the original design, which I really like. And having all of Sigma's random pieces cleaned up and streamlined is great. It's certainly an upgrade. Sojourn. Our first look at Sojourn's design was his portrait from a seasonal story event in AO1, where her hair actually came out of forehead vents. AO2's look just made them tattoos, which, while that is a much less unique design trait, it also looks better, so I'm glad they decided to change it. We are, once again, confronted with random holes in her clothing, but this time they look more like metal screws, and considering Sojourn is mostly metal, I'm okay with that. Sojourn's whole vibe is very cool, and I'm shocked they managed to make a character that has this much skin showing, but doesn't look underdressed for combat. A feat of character designing that the AO team failed to reach for another member of the roster we'll discuss later. But my favorite part of Sojourn's design is her color scheme. It's not often that I see this hue of maple/cream used this much on a character and have it look good. The accents of red, white, and black really pop. I just wish her knuckles matched the rest of her body. Who colored them red? Answer for your crimes. Soldier 76. I find it very, very funny that only the characters themed after North American countries have their nation's flag colors directly incorporated into their color palette. Anyway, Soldier's concept is just US veteran Robocop, and you have to admit they achieved that goal. Red, white, and blue are balanced well, and by keeping those colors only on half his body, they don't allow him to look too silly or mascot-like. More than anything, Soldier looks ready for battle, and that's exactly how you want him to look. Most of the belts on him actually serve a purpose and aren't just there for show, which not only avoids getting me annoyed, but also makes him look more practical. The mask with the visor is a very cool and menacing visage, and allows the design to link closer to the aesthetics of Overwatch's world. It also really helps with the hidden identity vigilante thing. Soldier's scar tells you he's seen his fair share of fighting, which is some more of that storytelling through design I've mentioned. He has his biotic healing canisters on his arm and belt, and you already know I love it when characters have their equipment on them. But 76 actually grabs that and takes it one step too far by including a weapon on his body that he never uses. He has this sidearm on him that is not and has never been incorporated into his gameplay ever, which is really weird. There are other strange but small design choices like that on Soldier, like how half his Letterman jacket's collar is bigger and longer than the other, and how his shirt has this metal collarbone armor for some reason. Ignoring all that though, this is a good design that does exactly what it set out to do. No language on Earth has a word for how conflicted I am about Soldier's out-to look. There are parts of it I love, and other parts I really don't. Good stuff first. This haircut? Perfect. While switching his mask to a visor loses some of the undercover hero vibe, it just makes more sense for Soldier's tactical visor to actually be a visor. It also allows him to have a beard, which is a fantastic look for him. We can also see more of his scars like this, so that's another bonus. I like the added bits of armor, makes him look more protected. Finally, the thicker jacket, which now has a symmetrical collar by the way, in combination with his new haircut makes him appear taller and broader, which I like. Now onto the bad stuff. By far the biggest misstep of this design is that, outside of his hair, he has lost all of his white, which severely dampens his iconic USA imagery, especially on his back. This darker blue also doesn't pop as much on his outfit. The Overwatch 2 redesign was their only opportunity to get rid of this useless sidearm, and they didn't. Instead, they added a belt on the bottom and on the side of it, along with several other belts all over his outfit that don't actually function and are only there for show. I get where they were coming from with this ripped scarf, but it clashes with the rest of the design, which is otherwise very clean and neat. Why is his logo stamped onto his shirt? Why is there a zipper on top of the side of his jacket? Why are his shoes simultaneously lace sneakers, slip-ons, and sandals? Why is he wearing belted thigh armor, and then another piece of thigh armor on top of that, under the holster for the pistol he doesn't use? Why is he wearing a seatbelt? This is the best example in the roster of Overwatch 2's new looks, adding and changing stuff randomly just to make things different at the detriment of the character. There are so many characters I wish had their original and new designs merged to get the best of both worlds, and Soldier is no exception to that. Sombra. Oftentimes, designers fall into the trap of making a character look boring because they're supposed to be stealthy, so practically speaking they wouldn't be wearing any color or unique fashion items to make them memorable or give them a unique silhouette. Sombra avoids that problem perfectly by making the fact that she dresses very garishly for a stealth character part of her personality. Objectively speaking, she can pretty much go invisible at any time, so her outfit's not a big deal practically. But more than that, being noticeable is the point for her. It's part of her character. She enjoys going unnoticed by people while wearing the most noticeable outfit imaginable. This allows Sombra to still make sense as a sleuth both in-game and in lore, while also giving us a very fun design to look at. These pinks, purples, and blues are pretty, and Sombra uses a ton of gradients in her look. I love how her design doesn't really give her proper shoes. It makes her look more quiet, weirdly enough. Sombra has a lot of wire-adjacent patterning all over her, especially on her head and hands, which really sells the idea that she's a hacker. And between her hair, collar, and overlapping layers, there's no way you're mistaking Sombra's silhouette for someone else's. I honestly couldn't ask for better. The thing that grabs my attention the most when looking at Sombra's redesign is her color palette. Every tint is significantly brighter, and the gradients between them have been faded out even more for a slower, more gradual change between hues. The texturing on the parts of her body with the brightest colors, her arms and legs, is what ultimately gives her such a different look though. Her last design was textured to look like tights or leggings, very much a cloth material. But in this design, her limbs look like they're coated in some kind of glass or transparent metal, giving it a much more sleek/smooth feel to it and allowing the colors to pop out more. Sombra's hair has not only been shortened, but also changed from a brown to pink ombre to simply being purple, which is a downgrade in my opinion. She's kept the same idea of wire-like patterning, but it's sort of been incorporated a lot more clunkily here, with random belts and tubes hanging out of her clothes. This bubble wrap shirt she has on under her vest is really weird. But I do like this big grid pattern since it evokes the image of a keyboard, good for a hacker character. Sombra's also showing a lot more skin now, with her shoulders and back being exposed, and I'm torn. On one hand, I like the look of these very long gloves, but on the other hand, her outfit looks significantly less viable for combat than before, and since she has so many overlapping layers on her lower half with essentially none on her top half, it ends up making her look pretty bottom heavy. Outside of the colors and texturing, this design unfortunately feels like a lesser version of Sombra's original look. Symmetra. This design feels like a good idea that was never expanded upon, like a first draft sketch of a character that was rushed out, or like no one actually cared enough to make the design worth looking at. This look of a long article of clothing in between the legs, both front and back, is one of the most overused looks on the roster, and while it definitely fits Symmetra's vibe, I'm left wanting something more interesting and Symmetra specific. These long cylindrical tube earrings look out of place in a design with an otherwise very sharp shape language. Her headpiece provides a somewhat unique silhouette, but it's not intriguing to look at. These holy thigh-high tights are such a strange addition to the kind of aesthetic Symmetra has going for, and this leotard is not working. This is not what an architect dresses like. Now this is better. She looks like she has had a lot more care put into her. Her last design was simple, and while simple in no way means inherently bad, there is such a thing as too simple, aka a boring design. This is not a boring design, however. These brighter blues and golds are much more pleasant shades to look at, and this patterning takes an uninteresting look and makes it immediately more appealing to the eye. There's so much detail here without being too busy. Her jewelry is more interesting and fits better with her stylish shape language, the colors are incorporated and balanced better, the added bits and bobs add some much needed interest, they removed her dumb leotard even. There's even a neat amount of storytelling here. As Symmetra has become less rigid and more able to see the flaws in the faction she works for, her design has become more asymmetrical to represent that, with a strand of hair out of place along with an outfit that's no longer perfectly uniform with itself. What an amazing improvement all around. Torbjorn. This guy is probably a recycled idea from Overwatch's original concept, which was a fantasy MMO called Titan. This game mostly tries to stay away from overused tropes for characters, so it's a little weird to see a World of Warcraft dwarf in the game. He doesn't feel necessary, and his design is not all that pleasant to look at. His claw hand and stature definitely give him a recognizable silhouette, but not a particularly memorable one, since dwarves are very common in many genres of video games. I like these two big exhaust pipes, and this 07 on his armor makes you think that there's some crazy obscure lore that even I'm not aware of about Torbjorn's, Reinhardt's, and Brigitte's armor. Torb's redesign is certainly an enhancement of his original look. I like the new hair, and allowing his outfit and armor to lean into a more casual vibe was a smart choice since Torb's retired now. This outfit looks a lot more at home in Torbjorn's own home forge than his last one, which I'm a fan of. His design still isn't too interesting, but it's definitely a better look than Torbjorn's Overwatch 1 design in my opinion. Tracer. Overwatch's original mascot character. This is a good look. The old leather jacket is a nice way to implement the idea of her being a pilot, and it meshes well with the oranges and whites of the rest of her design. These bright tights smartly emphasize her legs since running fast is her whole thing. It's cool how she carries her pulse bomb on her back, and having her pistols be a part of her gauntlets is inspired. I like the neat details like her call sign being written on her right arm and left leg, along with her jacket's patches telling you where she's from and what she used to do. These lacy parts on the sides of her legs don't feel like they really need to be there, nor do the useless belts for that matter. The fact that her goggles are so big and clunky, making her look childlike, naive, and eager, is probably my favorite part of the design though. It's not really storytelling, but it does subtly give you information about the character. Tracer's Overwatch shoe design is one of the first ones we got to see, and like most of the redesigns, there's good and bad to it. The new jacket looks sleeker, but this sandy gray doesn't work as well as the classic brown hat. I'm glad they did away with the useless belt and the lacy sides of her tights, instead opting to use very light patterning to add interest. But they've also changed the tights to a full bodysuit, incorporating a lot more orange to the rest of the design where the focus should be on her legs. These new goggles look better, I admit, but we do unfortunately lose out on the neat character information that the old goggles gave us. Her jacket's patches have been axed too. I like her new shoes, but her gauntlets, which are a lot more important for her silhouette, have shrunk down and don't actually look like her pistols are stored in them anymore. I feel like I repeated myself a lot during this video, but it's still true. I really wish some of these characters could have their old and new designs mixed together. Widowmaker. This design gets a lot of criticism, and it should. I don't need my characters to look all 100% sensible for combat, because if they did, then everyone would look like a Call of Duty character, and that's so beyond boring. However, I do need their outfits to make at least a little sense, and this boob window jumpsuit does not make sense in the slightest. It's also just ugly. This shiny magenta clashes hard with the rest of the colors in the look, which are mostly pretty desaturated. These medium grays are also very boring accents. It's not all bad though. Her tattoos are all very cool, and it's clever how all the sharp elements are meant to look like the fangs of a spider, hence the Black Widow inspired name. It's awesome how her Venom Mine launcher is a part of her armor, and I love how her helmet evokes the idea of a spider's many eyes. I also just noticed how her Venom Mine launcher parallels Anna's Nano Boost launcher, since they're rivals. The broad strokes are bad and are obviously the result of the team wanting some eye candy in their game, but the finer details are actually smart, which is weird because it's usually the reverse. Widow looks exceedingly cooler like this. She still has the femme fatale vibe the designers were going for, but the added bits of armor and layers make her look immediately more protected and less fanservice-y. Don't get me wrong, this is still an over-sexualized design meant to lure in a specific type of player, but it's a lot less annoying to look at now. Changing the grays to be more black and purplish was a smart choice and goes hand in hand with her magenta accents. Changing her ponytail to a braid makes her look way more put together and awesome without really messing with her silhouette all that much. She still has the sharp fang-like accents, which is good, and I love what they did to her helmet. It looks so much more sleek and modern and dangerous, but still has the spider eye vibe. My only gripe is that her Venom Mine launcher looked a lot better the way it was before, more defined and with a more unique shape. Still though, this is an improvement 1000%. Winston. So Winston's whole thing is that he's a talking gorilla. Since it's quite an uncommon premise for a character, the OWL team basically did nothing interesting with his design. It's a monkey, what else do you want? So that's all Winston really is. There's no color, no interest, no nothing. He's from the moon, so to represent that, they gave him an astronaut suit. And he's a scientist, so to represent that, they gave him glasses. I'm sorry, but there is nothing to analyze here. Winston's OWL2 design is essentially the exact same look as his OWL1 design, just cleaned up and with slightly more color on him. So I guess I can say it's an improvement. Like, it is more pleasant to look at than his original look, so yeah. That doesn't mean it's not still boring though. Wrecking Ball. Winston's not the only playable animal character from the moon. Hammond, clever name for a hamster, huh? Has one big strength, and that's his silhouette. In one form, he's just a sphere, which isn't too interesting, but in his regular form, he's a sphere with a hamster poking out of it, 2 machine guns, and crab legs. He's not too shabby with color either. While this blue-silver isn't a very stimulating hue, it matches very well with the orange accents used all throughout his design. I'm impressed with how they managed to make a spherical tank still look bulky. However, Ball does sort of fall into the same trap that Winston does, where his gimmick, being a hamster ball, is all his design truly is. Most of the other designs in the game take their initial concept or trope and push it into something cool and interesting. Wrecking Ball does that better than Winston, but not much better. The Overwatch team had 2 main directions to choose from when updating Hammond's design. Either lean into the junker post-apocalypse scrapyard aesthetic, or push more into the moon astronaut science experiment theme. Since most of OWL2's designs are focused around streamlining a character and making them look more modern and sleek, it shouldn't be a surprise that they chose the latter. I personally wish they went the other way for a few reasons, but this works okay. The added layering to his mech's armor makes it look even heavier and tankier, and the goggles make him look more like the engineer that he is. But I kind of wish they kept his old color palette. Otherwise, I do like this design better. Zarya. Zar is pretty cool. Her hot pink hair would normally be somewhat distracting, but she's outfitted in so much deep blue that it ends up looking balanced and, dare I say, iconic. Her scar isn't exactly a unique shape, but it does add a bit of memorability to her look. Her large weapon, along with her large physique, makes her profile one that really stands out in the roster. I love that her tattoo is of her weightlifting record in kilos. While Zarya's design didn't immediately grab me when I first saw it, I came to appreciate it over time. What a downgrade! I'm sorry, it just is. Zarya's hair in her redesign has lost its edge, and now it's a limp comb-over looking thing, and it's bad. Makes her silhouette less eye-catching, makes her shape language less interesting, it's just a bad choice. And this ponytail? Why do I get the feeling Mercy wasn't allowed to have a ponytail anymore because Zarya stole it? Why did she lose all her blue? Her color palette is so boring now, there's no longer anything left to balance out her hair. And why cover her tattoo? I was okay with covering Lucio's tattoo because it was just a frog, but Zarya was a neat bit of lore. Thumbs down. Zenyatta. Zen has an awesome aesthetic. He's a robot monk who uses giant technological prayer beads as weapons. You can't tell me that's not cool. I liked it so much that I actually used Zen as my PFP for a hot minute. But while the concept is charming, the full design sort of loses its impact when you stare at it for too long. His colors are pretty desaturated and dark, and this tint of mustard yellow isn't all that appealing to the eye. The lack of a shirt is an intriguing choice, but it does make his top half look a lot less detailed than his bottom half. The giant orbs of harmony and discord along with his baggy robes and hanging tassel makes him difficult to mistake for someone else, but I've always wondered why his clothes are also tattered and ripped. Supposedly he's a traveling sage of sorts, so I guess that makes a little bit of sense, but it gives him a rough sort of look that I don't think the character designers were going for. Zen's concept art sees him wearing an extra layer of clothing on his thighs that gives him more detail and patterning than he actually got in-game, and you can sort of feel that lack of detail in his design, unfortunately. Still, it's a great look, it could just use some touching up. Thankfully, a global redesign of the cast is exactly the kind of circumstance that could give Zen the touching up that he needs. He looks a lot more polished, literally. Not only are his clothes no longer ripped, but even his faceplate is shiny and new, no longer scarred. You can see this most clearly in the final invasion cutscene. He's also no longer shirtless, although I hesitate to call what he's wearing a shirt. It's more like a scarf with a crop top? I admit, he does better resemble the real-world monks he styled after like this. I especially like the addition of white to Zen's design, along with shifting the dark yellows into more of a gold color. But this look isn't flawless. I don't really like these red cords around his legs, and this one-sided triangle pattern on his sash doesn't really need to be there. And I miss the big tassel thing hanging off his belt. Other than those nitpicks, it's a pretty good design, or at least the broad strokes of it are. That was our final design. I mean, there is the Space Ranger character, who at the time of recording we haven't gotten a name or final design for, so I didn't include her. If you couldn't already tell, I'm really passionate about character design, and this video was pretty fun to make, so maybe I'll do something like it in the future for other pieces of media too. Thank you for watching, and remember to subscribe if you enjoyed me ranting for an hour. Bye.